Do I have to travel to a foreign country in order to learn a foreign language? I will give you my thoughts in this podcast, and I have a very, very interesting story to share with you at the end. My name is Franklin, and this is First1,000hours.com. Don't give up on your language learning marathon. You can make it. You can make it through your first 1,000 hours. I want to explain my thoughts about whether or not I have to go to a foreign country to learn a foreign language with this illustration. Let's say there are two people preparing for a marathon. One person is named Andrew and the other person is named Jeff. Both Andrew and Jeff are told constantly through blogs, YouTube videos, advertisements, and people they interact with in real life that the only way for them to get good at running a marathon is if they go to Spain. In Spain, they are told they will be able to associate with world-class marathon runners constantly. Andrew had a dream for a long time of being an excellent marathon runner one day, so he planned a 1-month trip to Spain the following year. He didn't do any training in his home country because he believed that he would only learn how to run marathons in Spain. Jeff, on the other hand, believed that whether or not he would become an excellent runner depended largely on whether or not he showed up to practice in his home country than if he went to Spain. He decided to spend 1,000 hours practicing for a marathon before going to Spain. He took advantage of running at various free parks to build up his endurance. At first, it was hard for him to run even 1 mile. Running was tedious and an exhausting process, but he didn't give up. At the end of his first 1,000 hours of training, running marathons was like a piece of cake. Both Andrew and Jeff eventually went to Spain for 1 month, but who do you believe was able to run marathons? In Spain, Andrew realized that associating with marathon runners didn't make him a marathon runner. He found out that if he really wanted to be a runner, he personally had to exercise, which was something that he could have done in his home country without paying costly travel expenses. Jeff's 1,000 hours of running in his home country prepared him for running marathons in Spain. And although he wasn't able to run faster than Spain's world-class runners, he was able to complete various marathons in his month-long stay in Spain, just like he did when he was in his home country. Just like getting ready for a marathon isn't based on being in a specific country, my language learning marathon, especially in the era of the internet, has little to do with whether or not I'm living in a foreign country. In my home country, I have a lot of time throughout the day to read and listen to things in Spanish and create my own immersive Spanish environment. I can choose to read part of a Spanish book before I go to work. I can choose to watch a Spanish YouTube video with Spanish subtitles while I eat breakfast. I can choose to listen to things in Spanish while I drive. Also, I can choose to change my phone, computer, and Facebook settings to Spanish. I can choose to go to a Spanish church or talk with a native Spanish speaker online. Or I can fill my mind with excuses. Nikki wrote the following on Fluent in 3 Months blog. I am addicted to excuses. For the past 15 months, I have been living in France and I don't speak much French. And until now, I have been dependent on the habit of excuses, which have enabled me to continue my life in this way. Here are the tools which I have been using to sell myself short. I work in English. I don't know enough grammar yet. I don't know enough vocabulary. I don't want to sound stupid. I'm afraid of making mistakes. I don't want people to laugh at me when I speak. I can't express myself fully, and on and on. Nikki was in France for 15 months, and yet she still didn't really know a lot of French. She learned that she had to get out of her comfort zone of excuses in order to advance in French. In our home countries, we can make similar excuses for not creating an immersive environment of our target language. If we are comfortable with making excuses for not really spending a good amount of time with our target language in our home countries, what will we do when we go to a foreign country? There's a principle in the Bible in Luke 16:10, which says, "He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much." The same way we seize opportunities to learn our target language in our home country will be the same way we seize opportunities to learn our target language in a foreign country. I was surprised to read about the amount of time a person put into learning a country's foreign language after being there for several months. The person put in less time per week learning that language than I was putting into learning Spanish in the United States. Though being surrounded by native speakers in a foreign country, that person also was seeking out a language partner online. That reinforces in my mind that language learners have to be active in creating opportunities for themselves if they truly want to learn a second language. Why not start now? What's nice about learning Spanish in the US is that I can immediately switch from my Spanish activities and function in a comfortable English environment. I can learn Spanish on my own terms with my own routine. Up to this point in this podcast, some of what I have said has been theory. However, the question remains, what has been the real experience of someone who has at least spent 1,000 hours learning a foreign language in their own country before going to a foreign country? I'm pleased to share with you the story of Connie Warner, my language motivational partner. She spent approximately 3 hours a day for 2 years learning Portuguese, a total of approximately 2,190 hours. And then she went to Brazil. Before I can share with you how she fared in Brazil, you need to know more about her and her experience learning Portuguese in her home country, the United States of America. Connie Warner is not someone to make excuses for herself when she sets out to meet goals. Even though she was learning Portuguese in adulthood, didn't have a formal training in Portuguese from school, and had never stepped outside of the US, she dedicated serious time to knowing Portuguese in a very unconventional way. Around the end of 2017, I met Connie on a language learning Facebook group. At that time, she had read 10 books in Portuguese, including a 200-page psychology book. I had been reading my first Spanish book, El Camino a Cristo, very casually, but after seeing her example, I gradually knew I could do better. Within 2 weeks of starting to learn Portuguese, Connie had a Brazilian language partner, and she talked with her new friend every day. In the beginning, she knew little of what her language partner was saying, but she has a high tolerance for the unknown. Within around 4 months, she was able to translate her Brazilian friend to her husband. In addition to reading and communicating with her language partner, she watched and listened to things in Portuguese. But I really want to highlight her experience at a Portuguese church, which I think was her closest experience to being in Brazil while living in the United States. For her first 6 months with Portuguese, Connie learned only online. She had her first face-to-face, real-life conversation on her 7th month, and she found a Portuguese church on her 9th month. She regularly attended that church for 1.5 years before going to Brazil. She told me that she was very nervous the first time she went to this Portuguese church, that she nearly pulled right back out of the parking lot. It was very nerve-wracking for her. As soon as she opened the front door, she was hit with Portuguese. She was very happy that the service was in Portuguese. Connie had been worrying that the church service would be in English. Her nervousness was because she was encountering a new language, a new church, a new Christian sect, a new culture, and she was alone. However, she said it was tough, but things that are worth it are never easy. By going to that Portuguese church, Connie lived out her belief that your language level improves the more you push yourself. It's a skill, not a study subject. In 1 week, after almost 1 year at being at the Portuguese church, Connie was able to spend 30 hours with Brazilians while living in the United States. Those 30 hours came from spending time at evening meetings at church, going to our weekly church service, and spending time at a church member's house. That level of interaction with Portuguese in a week far exceeds many native English speakers that go to a foreign country to learn a foreign language, but get caught up in an English bubble. At another time, Connie went to a Portuguese church camp over a weekend, and she wrote this to me during that time. Last week, I saw a post for a week-long German immersion trip. It didn't say what it cost, but I'm sure it was salty. I got to thinking about it. You would be with other learners, one non-native teacher, and one native speaker. Then spouses of the students could come. So unless there is a rule forbidding English, you're basically going to be spending a lot of time in English with some German lessons thrown in with other learners who will be making plenty of mistakes. Or you can find an opportunity like this. For $100, I'm getting so far, and not counting Sunday, 23 hours with the best Brazilian Portuguese speakers in the world, also known as Brazilians. No need to buy a plane ticket and get a visa either. On one day at church, Connie didn't understand a sermon from a visiting pastor, so she took the video from Facebook and uploaded it to YouTube so she could watch it again with auto-generated Portuguese subtitles. This is another example of her extreme dedication to learning Portuguese. As a result of her connection with her Brazilian church friends and her dedication to learn Portuguese outside of church, she was able to translate conversations in Portuguese to English and vice versa for people on several different occasions. A few months before Connie went to Brazil, she wrote, "Portuguese is getting so clear, at times it's like English," after she had spoken to her Brazilian language partner that day. I want to emphasize again that Connie didn't just go to church to learn Portuguese. She wrote to me that language learning is an inside job. It's just you and the language for hours and hours. Talking with people is the performance part. At another time, she wrote, "I listen and read as much as I can every day. Conventional wisdom says to speak and speak to improve. It's pretty cool that reading and listening improves speaking instead." After spending approximately 2,190 hours with Portuguese, Connie went to Brazil. But how was her experience? Did she understand what people were saying? Did her immersive language learning environment really help her in that country? I will answer these questions in an upcoming podcast. My name is Franklin, and this is First1,000hours.com. Don't give up on your language learning marathon. You can make it. You can make it through your first 1,000 hours.